The Seattle Seahawks just won the Super Bowl, and somehow that is not the scariest part. The scary part is what came after. No panic moves, no loud spending spree, no desperate grab for headlines. Just a team moving like it already knows the rest of the league is chasing something it cannot copy. That is where this gets dangerous. Jackson Smith-Njigba is turning into the kind of weapon that changes how defenses line up, and A.J. Barner is starting to look like one of those players people ignore until he is suddenly hurting teams every single week. Then you look at the other side and it gets even worse for the NFC, because Devin Witherspoon does not look like a rising star anymore. He looks like the kind of defender who can take over games and drag the whole unit with him. So what nobody is talking about is how strange this whole thing feels. Teams usually get weaker after they win it all. Coaches leave, depth gets tested, pressure builds, and little cracks start showing. Seattle should have been dealing with that same mess, but instead they look even more settled. That is the twist. This does not feel like a champion trying to protect something fragile. It feels like a team that cleared the hardest level and came back stronger. The offense still has juice. The quarterback still gives them control. The defense still has a nasty edge. And the silence around all of it only makes it more serious, because when a team this good stops needing attention, it usually means they are focused on something bigger. But here's where the story turns. This is not only about stars or last season or one big win. This is about how Seattle built the whole thing and why their way might be the part every other franchise fears most. While other teams keep trying to patch holes and force a window open, the Seahawks look like they already built one from the inside out. That is why the next layer matters so much, because once you see how Seattle developed this core, trusted its own plan, and kept the machine moving without blinking, the whole offseason starts to look a lot more threatening than people realize. The part that should really bother the rest of the league is not just that Seattle won, it is how they built it. This is not some roster held together by expensive quick fixes. The Seahawks are leaning on players they drafted, developed, and kept growing inside their own system. Jackson Smith-Njigba and Devin Witherspoon came into the league together in the first round and both became major pieces of Seattle's rise, while A.J. Barner is already an active part of the offense after arriving in the 2024 draft. That is what makes this feel bigger than one title run. It looks repeatable. What makes that blueprint dangerous is how stable it feels. A.J. Barner is still on Seattle's roster and already showed he can give them real production at tight end, while Devin Witherspoon remains one of the biggest defensive pillars on the team. Jackson Smith-Njigba is also still one of the central faces of this offense, and the Seahawks have kept building around players who already fit the identity instead of chasing random outside answers. That is how strong teams stay strong. They do not start over every spring. They keep stacking on top of what already works, and that is why this story gets even more interesting now. Because once a team proves it can build stars from within, every quiet move starts meaning more. Every low-cost signing, every backup battle, every hidden piece in that locker room starts to matter. Seattle already has the core. Now it becomes a question of how they protect it, and the first place that tension really shows up is in the backfield, where one big departure just opened the door for a completely different kind of move. The first real twist of Seattle's offseason showed up in the backfield. Kenneth Walker did leave for Kansas City, and that instantly changed the shape of this offense. Because you do not just replace a back who finished his Seattle run with Super Bowl MVP energy and over 3,500 rushing yards for the franchise. But instead of making some loud panic move, the Seahawks stayed true to their style and signed Emmanuel Wilson. That is where this gets interesting. Seattle did not chase noise, it chased fit, toughness, and value, which tells you this front office still believes the answer can come from smart pressure, not wild spending. What makes Emmanuel Wilson worth watching is that he is not arriving as some random camp body. Seattle officially announced the signing just days ago, and the move came right as the team was reshaping the room after Kenneth Walker moved on. That matters. It means this was not filler. It was a direct response to a real opening. And when a team like this makes a quiet move at a position this important, it usually means they see something most people miss. That is the part fans should pay attention to, because the Seahawks are not trying to win headlines here, they are trying to win the role. But Emmanuel Wilson is not the full story, and that is exactly why this section matters. Seattle did not just lose a starter, it opened a battle, a real one. The kind that can shift the whole offense depending on who rises first. Because once one door closes in this backfield, another one opens for players already inside the building. And that is where this story starts getting a lot more dangerous for the rest of the league. The next scary part for the rest of the NFC is that Seattle might not even know its best answer at running back yet. That sounds risky. But it is actually the opposite. It means this room still has upside left to uncover. Zach Charbonnet is coming back from a torn ACL, and Seattle's own updates have been positive, with John Schneider saying the outlook is very good and praising the way Charbonnet attacks everything in front of him. That matters because this is not just about healing, it is about trust. When a team keeps talking about a player like that after a serious injury, it usually means they still see him as a major piece of what comes next. But the tension does not stop there. Kenny McIntosh is also pushing to get back after missing the full 2025 season with a knee injury, and that gives this backfield a very different feel. Now, it is not only about replacing what left, it is about discovering what was delayed. Seattle suddenly has multiple runners trying to claim the same future, and that kind of fight can sharpen an offense fast. One player brings power, another brings burst, another brings patience, and the whole room starts feeling alive again because nobody can just assume the job will fall into their lap. That is what makes this story so dangerous. The Seahawks do not need one perfect script here, they need pressure, competition, and one player to force the issue. And once that battle starts taking shape, another name becomes impossible to ignore. Because while everyone watches the injured backs try to return, there is already someone in this room who showed he can handle the moment when the stage gets biggest. The dangerous part of Seattle's running back story is that one of the most important names in the room is the one almost nobody talks about. George Holani is still on this roster, and he already showed the Seahawks they can trust him when things get tense. Seattle's own free agency tracker said Holani returned from injured reserve in the postseason and stepped right into the number 2 role after Zach Charbonnet went down, playing real snaps in playoff wins over the Rams and Patriots. That is not camp hype. That is a staff putting him on the field when the season was on the line. What makes George Holani different is not just that he survived the moment, it is that he helped steady it. He is not being handed attention like a headline name, but the coaching staff clearly sees value there, or he would not have been trusted in that spot. Seattle also tendered Holani earlier this year, which tells you they wanted him back in the building for a reason. When a team protects a player like that and then leans on him in the playoffs, it usually means the role is bigger than fans realize. And that is where this whole backfield story starts turning from interesting into serious. Because now Seattle is not just waiting on health, it is sitting on proof. George Holani already gave them something real, and that means this room has more answers than people think. But as important as the backs are, the next twist might matter even more, because what happened to Seattle's coaching staff after the title should have created problems, and somehow it may have made this team stronger. Most champions get hit the hardest right after the confetti falls. And Seattle was supposed to feel that too. Clint Kubiak left after the Super Bowl run, and that kind of change usually shakes an offense fast. But the twist is that the Seahawks did not respond like a team trying to survive damage. They moved like a team protecting momentum. Mike McDonald promoted Brian Fleury to offensive coordinator in February, and both made it clear the goal is to carry forward what already worked instead of tearing the whole thing apart. That is a huge deal, because panic changes can break contenders, while smart changes can keep them dangerous. What makes this feel stronger is the staff around him. Seattle finalized its 2026 coaching staff with Aiden Durda as defensive coordinator, Jay Harbaugh staying on special teams, and John Benton continuing in a major role on the offensive line. That matters because this is not a shaky rebuild on the headset. It is a structure with proven voices already in place. When a team keeps key support in the building while adding fresh energy at the top of the offense, it gives the whole season a different feel. More stable, more connected, more ready for another push. And that is why this part of Seattle's offseason should not be brushed aside. The staff did not get thinner, it got reworked with intent. That means the Seahawks are not only counting on star players to carry them back, they are betting on a sharper machine behind the scenes. And once that machine is in place, the next thing that starts standing out is how Seattle handled the bottom half of the roster. Because some of the quietest moves of this offseason might say the most about how serious this team really is. Championship teams do not stay dangerous just because of stars, they stay dangerous because the floor of the roster never gets soft. That is where Seattle keeps separating itself. Brandon Peely is back, Brady Russell is back, Josh Jones is back, Rodney Thomas II is in. None of those moves were built to win a headline war, but that is exactly why they matter. These are the kind of names that hold a season together when injuries hit, when the rotation gets tested, when a game in November comes down to whether your roster still has fight left in it. Seattle is not stacking famous names here, it is stacking trust. And the standard inside the building looks just as sharp as ever. The Seahawks brought back the pieces they wanted and moved on from the ones that were not part of the picture, including Tyler Hall. Now, and that tells you this front office is not keeping players around out of comfort. Every spot has to mean something. Then you add a veteran force like DeMarcus Lawrence still sitting on this roster, and suddenly the message gets louder without anyone saying much at all. Seattle is building a team that can survive the long season, not just win the pretty part of it. That is why these quiet moves matter more than people think. Depth is not flashy until it saves you. Standards are not loud until they cut the wrong player. And once you see how Seattle handled the hidden layers of the roster, the final piece starts coming into view, because now the question is not whether this team is built well enough. The question is whether the road ahead is about to make this whole thing even more dangerous. The final twist is that Seattle may be heading into this season with timing on its side too. The Seahawks officially hold 4 picks in the 2026 draft, including pick number 32, and that matters because it gives John Schneider options instead of pressure. Stay there and add one more premium piece or move back and spread the value across the roster. Either way, Seattle is not walking into this draft desperate. That is what makes them dangerous. Teams make bad choices when they need answers fast. The Seahawks do not look like they are in that kind of rush. Then you look at the opponent list, and the whole picture starts feeling even more serious. Seattle's official 2026 opponents are already set, with home games against the Cowboys, Giants, Chiefs, Chargers, Bears, and Patriots. It's plus road trips to the Broncos, Raiders, Eagles, Commanders, and Panthers, on top of the usual division battles with the Rams, 49ers, and Cardinals. That does not guarantee anything, but it does show a path. A real one. This is not a team staring at chaos. This is a contender looking at a season where smart roster building could pay off all over again. And that is the whole point of this story. Seattle did not spend the offseason begging for attention. It kept key depth, added pieces like Emmanuel Wilson and Rodney Thomas II, protected the structure, and left itself room to strike again when the moment is right. That is why the league should be paying attention now, because the Seahawks are not trying to prove they belong anymore. They already did that. Now they look like a team built to stay in the fight a lot longer than anyone wanted.